Hey everybody, today we'll be looking at a brief political history of the Byzantine Empire. Tomorrow we'll be moving on to look at some of the cultural and religious aspects of the empire. But for today we're just going to focus on wars and borders and leaders and stuff like that. By the end of the video, I hope that you can answer these three questions. Perhaps take a moment and consider them before moving on to the next slides. So, the center of the Byzantine Empire is the city of Constantinople, which some would consider to be the new capital of the Roman Empire, or just the new Rome. So after the split of the empire in the 3rd century AD, the Western Roman Empire, as you know, continues to decline, but the East remains quite strong. And this is because the eastern part of the empire is richer, has a larger population, and is more easily connected to the other civilizations of the world over in India and Asia, and they can trade with them and stuff like that. And partially for this reason, Constantinople is able to flourish. So it's founded in 330 AD by Constantine, and it's in an excellent spot because its location allows it to connect a bunch of different important trading routes and to profit from all of these. So in the markets of Constantinople, you can walk from one stall to another and find silk from China, spices from India, and furs from Northern Europe, not to mention all sorts of other stuff. But basically, it's in the center of this global network of trade. And for that reason, the city is able to become rich and prosperous and to flourish and expand. And it's partially because of Constantinople's strong economy that the Byzantine Empire is able to remain strong. Another reason that Constantinople is such a successful city is that it is placed at a tiny strait called the Bosporus, which connects the Black Sea with the Mediterranean Sea. And because it's placed at this narrow strait, it can control all the trade moving between the two seas, which once again allows it to take advantage of trade and also to tax traffic that moves back and forth between the two areas. It is, to put it in a short way, an excellently placed city. So another thing that contributes to the early strength of the Byzantine Empire, besides the excellent placement of the capital city of Constantinople, is the reign of the powerful Emperor Justinian. And Justinian was a strong ruler, and he wielded absolute power over the empire, both as a political and a religious leader. So that meant that both in the political and in the religious realm, he was supreme. He got to make all the final decisions, and since he was a good ruler, this turned out to be good for the Byzantine Empire. Justinian's main goal was to restore the former greatness of the Roman Empire. He and many people in the Byzantine Empire still viewed themselves as Romans, and they wanted to regain their former greatness that was their Roman heritage. One step that he took towards this was to reform the legal codes. And basically, he has people work to revise and organize the law codes of ancient Rome and to produce a single, rational, organized code that would run the entire Byzantine Empire. And he's successful in this, and it results in a law code known as Justinian's Code that is very rational and very organized and easy for people to use and understand. And this is helpful because if the laws of an empire are easy to understand and make sense, it is easier to run the empire. Also, Justinian is famous for his attempts to reconquer areas of the ancient Roman Empire. So he sends armies to conquer back North Africa, parts of Spain, and Italy. And he succeeds in this. And for the next 100 years or so, the Byzantine Empire includes much of what used to be the Western Roman Empire. Rome, once again, is controlled by the Roman Empire. But holding these territories turns out to be very expensive and also prevents the Byzantine Empire from using resources in the east to combat enemies there. So it turns out not to be a sustainable conquest. After Justinian's reign, what we see is a long, slow decline of the Byzantine Empire. Basically, the Byzantines are too weak to hold all of their territory. They're surrounded by enemies and they don't have the strength to fight them all off. Justinian's successors face enemies on both the east and the west. And since they're not strong to fight everybody, they have to decide which side of the empire they want to defend and keep. And perhaps not surprisingly, the Byzantines decide to abandon the western territories and to defend the richer and more populous territories to the east. So basically, they allow other smaller kingdoms in Europe to reconquer Spain and Italy. And they focus on defending their territories in the east. And the reason they need to focus in the east is because there is a competing empire known as the Sassanid Empire, which is attempting to expand its influence in the region. So the Byzantines fight long and bloody wars with the Sassanids, but ultimately still lose a lot of territory. And before long, they've lost almost all of their southern territory. They lose Egypt, they lose Mesopotamia, the Levant, and they're reduced to controlling Anatolia and bits and pieces of territory in Africa. But so after this long and bloody war, both the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Empire are greatly weakened. And it's at this time that the Islamic kingdoms emerge. And because both empires are quite weak, the Islamic kingdoms are able to conquer and claim large chunks of the Middle East for themselves. And they begin chipping away more and more at the Byzantine territory in Anatolia and elsewhere. Basically, this conflict between Islamic kingdoms and the Byzantine Empire continues for centuries. And every century, the Islamic kingdoms make a little bit more progress against the Byzantines, until centuries later, in 1453, the Byzantine Empire finally crumbles when an Islamic group known as the Ottoman Turks conquer the capital city of Constantinople. But so just to get a sense of how long and slow this decline was, is it's almost 1,000 years after Justinian that Constantinople is finally conquered. So the Byzantines managed to hold on for a very long time, even though they are confronted with a wave after wave of powerful enemies. So that's basically it for the short political history of the Byzantine Empire. After a brief period of expansion around 500 AD, you see a long, slow decline that lasts almost 1,000 years until Constantinople is finally conquered by the Ottoman Turks in 1453. Tomorrow we're going to look at some cultural and religious aspects of the Byzantine Empire, but for tonight just make sure you can answer these 3 questions, which we will deal with in class tomorrow.